Well, blessed good morning to all of you. Glad to see you here, see your smiling faces, and we're so glad to have a number of visitors with us. And as Rodney said, you are our precious and honored guests, and we hope that we'll be able to make you feel welcome and get to know you a little bit better in between our worship and our Bible classes. Thank you so much for being here. This morning we're going to use this sermon as part of our ongoing series of what we call relationship or marriage improvement. And we're going to take a little bit of a break from our regular series where we've been talking about communication in marriage and in our relationship. And today we're going to go back to Genesis chapter 2, verse 24, where marriage begins, where it all starts, and we're going to talk about becoming one flesh. So let's start over in Genesis chapter 2 and in verse 24. And we know the story where God looks down, he sees Adam alone. He says it is not good for man to be alone. And so he's going to make a helper, and he takes from Adam a rib, and he forms the woman, and he brings the woman to the man, and it is love at first sight. He's like, you got it right, God. This is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. And he names her of the man. He names her woman. And based on that reaction, God, very interestingly, in one sentence, creates marriage. Something that has sustained since the beginning, something that Christians, non-Christians, all want to be part of what God created, and that is that marriage relationship, that marriage covenant. And so God says, for this cause a man shall leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. Now, one of the interesting things about this is, I just got to be honest, I started thinking back, and I don't know if I've ever heard a sermon in the church where a preacher tried to explain exactly connecting what is that two becoming one? What is that one flesh? How do you do that? What does that look like? What is that really referring to when it comes to two becoming one flesh? I must admit, I've preached this about two becoming one, leaving and cleaving, becoming one, but never really addressed exactly what that looked like. And so I'm going to try to do that today. And maybe something will stick with you. Maybe you'll say, no, I don't see it that way. But let's talk a little bit about what does it mean for that one flesh. Let's look at a time where Jesus actually quotes from Genesis 2, verse 24, and that is in the context. Ben brought this up in Matthew 19, verse 5 and 6. Jesus says, for this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and shall be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. There's the quote, but this is what Jesus brings out of that. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, no person is to separate. So the question comes about, is that one flesh simply talking about that they are one, they are married for the rest of their life, the duration of that? Or is there more to it than that? Well, one of my favorite movies kind of had that same emphasis. As you can see, Jesus is using that, and what he's drawing from that is what? Don't separate. What God has joined together, don't separate. It's to be everlasting. It's to be a lifetime, right? Well, one of my favorite movies brings out kind of that same context. Maybe you've seen this movie, Fireproof, all about marriage and this couple having trouble in marriage. One of my favorite movies, one, because I believe it really deals accurately with biblical marriage and really how Christians sometimes can struggle and even get to that point of of adultery and divorce. But another reason is because it's all in the context of firefighting. And that was a very important part of my life at a certain part of my life. And you might remember that scene where Caleb's the one that's having this struggle in his marriage and thinking about divorcing. And he's talking to his firefighter friend who's trying to convince him, no, that's not what you want. That's not going to help your situation. And to kind of bring up that idea that you are one flesh, you vow to that, you might remember he glues together these two plastic salt and pepper shakers. And he says, don't tear them apart. If you try to separate them, you're going to, what? Destroy both of them. This idea of one flesh is talking about one for the rest of our life. I definitely think that that's included in that one flesh, but I think there's more to it than that. I don't think Jesus just meant that that's what this one flesh is, just the duration of that. And you might remember that all this is in the context of Matthew 19, where he's asked about the duration of marriage. He's asked about the reason for divorce. Well, then Paul actually quotes from Genesis 2, verse 24 in Ephesians 5:31. And you might remember that in this context, he's not really talking about the duration of the one flesh, but he goes a little bit deeper. He talks about the roles of the one flesh, the wives and the husband, that the wives are to be submissive as the church is to Christ, and that husbands are to love their wives as Christ loved the church and as they love their own bodies. And though it's not quoted, we can look over in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 3 and 4. Again, Genesis 2:24 not being quoted there, but you definitely see this concept of oneness, the one flesh, the two becoming one, where Paul writes, the husband must fulfill his duty to his wife, and likewise the wife also to her husband. In verse 4, he says, the wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. And likewise, the husband also does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. I think we can clearly see there's that unity, that oneness in that. That carnal relationship between a husband and wife, I think by principle we can see that in that one flesh, a husband and wife have a duty to one another to what? Help each other, to be a companion, to fulfill the needs, not just fleshly, but spiritually, emotionally, on so many different levels. And so maybe by looking at these verses, especially where Genesis 2:24 is quoted, maybe we get a sense of what that means. It's not just the duration, but it's also what? There's more to it. It's the relationship, it's the commitment. It is not about two people, it's about two people caring and growing in that relationship. But this morning I want to try to bring another component in here, maybe a little bit more practical, another aspect, because as I've seen, a lot of times couples run into some struggles. And I want to talk about the struggle, the challenges that come about to make two into one. I want to use the example of a fictitious couple. This is not a real couple, but I want to introduce you to Harry, and this is Sally. And as you might have guessed, one day Harry met Sally, and they fell in love. And they decided that they were going to become one flesh. They were going to marry. And so as they began this relationship, obviously it started with an attraction. There was attraction there of them. But they realized that a relationship takes more than attraction. That there has to be compatibility. And so as they got to know each other, they understood as they were going to join their lives together that both of them, Harry and Sally, were going to bring themselves in the relationship. They were going to bring their personalities. They were going to bring their character traits. And a lot of times we figure this out, that's very positive, but some of that can be also a strain on a marriage. They were going to bring their habits, both good habits and even bad habits. That they were going to bring in the relationship what I call childhood baggage. All the things that they experienced in their childhood and learned. And again, that can be a very positive thing that you're bringing that into marriage, but it also can be a very challenging thing. Some things that still haunt you from your past. And indeed, you would want to have a spouse that would understand, that would help you with that baggage you're bringing. They also are going to bring in their strengths, but also their weaknesses. They're going to bring to the relationship their likes and their dislikes, and sometimes what he likes, she's not going to like, and vice versa. And so when you put that all together, all of that comes together and has to be worked through and has to be, as you start that relationship, there comes a point in time where you start to notice some of the things that aren't as pleasant about this person you're falling in love with. And you ask yourself, can I live with that? If you can't live with that, if it's just so negative to you, then that relationship probably is not going to work out. But for us that are married, we're like, yeah, that's not a problem. We can live with that weakness as they live with ours. So Harry and Sally get married, and as they continue to develop and grow in their relationship and they add children to it, at some point in a relationship, in marriage, at some point, spouses are going to come to each other at different times, and they're going to say, you need to stop doing that. You need to grow, and we need to stop putting that in our marriage. Or it might be something along these lines. You need to start doing this. You're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, right? And this can be any one of these things. This could be, you need to stop this bad habit. Or you need to stop something in your character that's really just not working for us. Or maybe there's some type of likeness or some type of strength or some type of weakness that we need to address. And we all have had that experience. But there are also times where a spouse might say something along these lines. You can't change me. Why are you trying to change me? Why are you trying to make me into something I'm not? Or they might say something like this: you should love me for who I am. Or thirdly, why can't you support me in this? Why can't you put up with this? Why can't you allow me to do this? Right? And the reality, brothers and sisters in Christ, is that in a relationship, in marriage, there are times where you have to look and you have to say, yeah, I understand that I need to work on that. I need to change that. I need to grow and mature. But there are also times where what we have up here is valid. That you can bring that to a marriage, and they shouldn't try to change you, or they should try to support you in that. And as we often say, there's this give and take in marriage. And so the question comes about, and sometimes it's a challenge for married couples, is when do you know, okay, I need to change that, or when is it appropriate to say, don't change me, you need to support me in this. And sometimes, if we come up with the wrong answer, that's when we start to have struggles in trying to have two very different people with different backgrounds, different personalities, different likes and dislikes, trying to become one. So I'd like to present to you a model that I think might help us to answer those questions, those times where, yeah, I need to change that. That's reasonable. I need to start doing that. I need to stop doing that. Versus when we could expect, you need to accept that about me. This is who I am. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about some ways that couples have tried to achieve the one fleshness, two becoming one that just really is not what God intended, really doesn't work. The first one, I'm not really sure this happens a whole lot, but it does happen sometimes where couples think, okay, I've got to become one, we got to be united, we got to be on the same page, and so how are we going to do that? Well, we become exactly alike. Well, how's that play out? Well, what you have is these couples that force themselves to mimic one another in their likes and their dislikes and their opinions and their priorities. And as I put that forward, I hope you can see that ain't going to work, is it? Right? They may create this unrealistic and unhealthy, and I'm going to add to that, unsustainable unity with the best of intentions. But again, how long will you be able to keep that up? How long will you pretend like you like something that you don't? And not only that, who decides, okay, we're going to like this? Is it your like or my like? Your dislike or my dislike? And so this doesn't work. And again, I don't see a lot of couples doing this. But what we need to understand is that even in God's two becoming one, there can be individualism and yet oneness. The second one, the second approach to becoming one flesh is much more common. And that is this idea that we're going to become one, you become like me. And so again, how does that play out? Well, one spouse becomes what we might say the model of the one flesh, and the other becomes the silent partner whose job is to mimic the model. This leads to one dominating the other, and what we need to understand that God never made for men and women to compete to be like each other. And that brings us to an illustration. When we were on a cruise, the cruise had a pickleball competition. And I said to Travis, hey, you want to join that? And maybe we can, play a few more games than usual, because usually what happens is you play one game and then you're done and you have to stand in the back of this long line and wait for all these other people to finish their game. And so usually you get one game, because who wants to be on a cruise and wait in a long line, right? So he said, okay, we'll join. And we were really lucky because a lot of the teams that signed up weren't very good. And so we found ourselves in the semifinals. And we were playing this married couple. Now, this married couple was just like this. The husband loved pickleball. You could tell the wife didn't care one way or another. He wanted to play pickleball. He made her play pickleball. And if you know anything about pickleball, it's kind of like tennis. At some point, the serve is going to come to you and you have to hit it over. So he taught his wife how to hit the ball, at least hit the ball over on a serve. And so what I did, I know it's so mean, I put as much spin on that ball as I could when I was serving to her. And sure enough, she was like, missed it. But there was a few times she got it over. And when she got that ball over, guess what happened next? She kind of went over here on the side, and he took over. He played every shot. It didn't matter if it was coming towards her. He would leap over there, hit that shot. It was all about him. And I thought about that. How he just controlled her and she just followed along. And his controlling personality just extended throughout the game and beyond the game. He really, really irritated me. And so I want to use that as an example, but it also was a little therapy. So thanks for letting me get that out. It makes me feel so much better. But that's very common. But that's not what God intended. And I want to add this as well. That there was in the past some Christian marriages who felt that this is the way it was. And they let people against God and against God's form of marriage and feminists use this to say, oh, look, when you follow the Bible, this is what happens. All you have to do is read Ephesians 5, and you can see there's nothing that's allowed in this. You see, there can be individual differences between spouse, and they still can become one flesh. All right, third way that sometimes people try, and that is, well, this is the mathematical approach, right? We got to become 100, right? We have to have 100. We got to become that one flesh. So we have a 50-50 marriage. This is the marriage that defines one flesh, that each spouse having to sacrifice half of themselves for the unity of marriage, right? So each spouse adds 50% of him, herself, and together they make 100% united and whole. Well, that raises a whole lot of questions, doesn't it? Are you like trying to think how this would work in your mind? Right? This is kind of like taking half a cup of water and half a cup of oil and putting them in the same container. Well, they might be in the same container, but what's happening? They're not mixing. It's not working too well, right? And that's kind of this idea. So, one of the questions, which half of you gets sacrificed? Number 2, does your spouse only want half of you? That doesn't sound very nice. And then who decides which half gets sacrificed? Do you decide that, or does your spouse? Right? And not only that, how could you even quantify, all right, I've sacrificed or I added half of me? How does that work out? Right? I'm sure there's some mathematician out there trying to work out the numbers right now. But what we understand is God intended both spouses to bring all of themselves into the marriage. This does not detract from becoming one flesh. So, what does this look like? Putting everything we've talked about today, this is my answer. We are 3. Some of you are going to say, well, we are 4, and that's okay. But that might seem a little confusing because we're trying to get down to 1, right? 2 becoming 1, and my answer is we are 3. So how does that work? Well, let me try to explain that. Each spouse brings their whole being and personality, who they are, into the marriage. Then there's 2, the husband and the wife. The third part of it is the relationship. They are united in that they are dedicated to one another in their relationship. Each partner adds themselves to work on, to nurture, to help the relationship to grow. And only in this way can 2 become one flesh. Let me try to map this out for us. All right? So you have the 2, the husband and the wife, and they want to become one flesh. Okay? Now I want to say to Aaron, because we had a little conversation about this, you'll notice there's some distance between the husband and wife. That doesn't mean they're apart. That doesn't mean they're having struggles. That's just, to keep everything lined up on the screen. Right? Well, I didn't put God into this because we're talking about Christian marriages, and obviously we'd want God in there. But 4, if you want to make this, and there are 4, I understand that, right? But it's a given. If we want to be part of what God created, we want to do it God's way. Let God guide us. Let God tell us how to become one flesh. But here's that third component, or fourth, and that is the relationship. We've made a vow to have this covenant relationship that we understand it's not about us. It's not about me. It's not about her. It's about, let me rephrase that. It is about us. It's not about me. It's not about her, right? And that was really something when I started dating Tamara and we started getting really serious. I had been out on my own and single for a long time. At least it seemed like a long time. And somebody, would come up and say, hey, we'd like to have you over Friday night, or we'd like to see if you could join us for this. And as a single man, I'd be like, yeah, that sounds good. I'll do that, right? Then when I got married, or I started dating Tamara, I'd say, yeah, I could do that. And then she'd be like, where are you going? And I'd be like, uh-oh, I forgot to tell you. Some people invited me over. Some people invited us over. And I had to learn, it's no longer just about me. It's about us, right? So I want you to think about how this plays out. Let's give some examples here. Let's say Harry likes to play golf. And a couple times a month, a couple Saturdays a month, he's out with his buddies playing golf. He enjoys that time. It kind of gives him some time away from the stress of life, the responsibilities of life. And Sally sees that and she says, yeah, no problem with that. I think that's good for you. I think that'll be good for your relationship. And Sally might even think, yeah, they'll be good. I'll give some time away from you, right? So she's willing to support him. It's good. Nothing unreasonable. Now, she might have to sacrifice something that she was going to do. She might have to, okay, I'll take care of the kids while you're golfing, right? There's that give and take. But what happens if Harry all of a sudden is like, man, I got to get my golf score. I got to get my golf game, improved, right? So now he's golfing every Saturday. And even on the weekdays after work, he's at the golf range. He's at the practice range. He's coming home late for dinner, right? Well, Sally's going to come to him and say, you need to stop that. That's just too much golf. That's what? Hurting the oneness. It's hurting the relationship. Now, hopefully, Harry can see, yeah, I'm out of control. That's unreasonable. I'm making the marriage about me and what I want. And hopefully, he'll cut back. He'll go back to the original. But imagine if Harry says, why are you trying to change me? Why can't you support me in this? Well, that's not the right time to say that. It's not the right situation because what? My actions are hurting the oneness, the relationship. I'm making it more about myself. Well, what if Sally likes to go out and shop and buy just, a couple outfits, or maybe likes to go and get her nails and toes done, right? Once a month or something like that. Harry sees that and says, yeah, that's good. That's good. Nothing unreasonable about that. I think that's good, precious time, and I think it'd be good for a relationship. And again, Harry might have to sacrifice. He might have to take the kids and let her have that time, and he's willing to do that. Right? Because two become one. It's good. But what if Sally all of a sudden, she starts buying more and more and more, and she's running up that credit card debt? And what if Sally decides she's going to try to hide all of that debt from Harry? Well, you can see that's not. That's something that does need to change. Harry does not need to support her in that. Why? Because that definitely is going to hurt that oneness, that one flesh, that relationship. And I really think that most of us here, if not all of us here, being married as long as we have, we figured this out, right? But I thought if we map it out this way and give us a visual, maybe it's a good reminder. Because no matter how long you're married, sometimes what you want to do becomes an issue. Or what she wants to do becomes an issue. And I think this is a really good way of thinking about two becoming one. And understanding, when do I need to grow and mature and change, and when should my spouse be willing to support me in that? So that's my lesson for you this morning. Thank you for your kind attention. I hope it's helpful. As I said, most of us probably have figured this out, but maybe it's a good reminder for us. But by way of invitation, let's use this chart. And let's say, what if we changed the husband and we just put you in that, and instead of the wife, we put God? Well, it's kind of like Ephesians 5, where our relationship with God is compared to marriage, right? Well, let me first ask you, if you're here this morning, maybe you don't even have the relationship with Jesus Christ, with God our Father. We want to encourage you to change that. If you're here this morning, you're like, I don't know exactly how I would start all that. Let us know. We want to study, want to show you, open that Bible, let you read it for yourself. But maybe you are in a relationship with God, and maybe you're making it more about yourself. And maybe you're doing the things that are hurting the relationship, because I will tell you, the only thing where it doesn't work in comparison to what we just talked about is the part of God. God's not going to do anything that's going to harm or affect negatively the relationship. That will all come from us. And sin and selfishness, and that really is what sin is, will definitely harm it and could even destroy it. So we want to encourage you. We want to offer this opportunity. If you need help, if you need prayers, if you need encouragement, you need study, if we can help you to make that relationship with God, as Christ leads us to that heavenly home that we sang about today, to hear those words we sang about, that greeting to come on in to that eternal life, if we can help you make that relationship strong again, won't you let that be known as together we stand and as we sing.